Party people. All right, so on a little impromptu live stream. If you want to join this panel, you have to go. That is where I'll be. If you roll and happen, but yeah, fun one. Have a everyone's having a don't listen to. So cool. What's up, GP? What's up, digital? Let me see. Right, no big topic, nothing. I had an interesting conversation last night. To talk about. Found a all they do, and it is not so much there to debate whether it's good or not. They're there to literally make you a vegan. I actually jump in. That should work. What's up, digital? How you doing? No, it's not. See, I told you guys what happened. I don't live in the future. Whole I don't get it. I don't, makes no sense at all. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. Hang on, I gotta fix my mic. It says cutting in and out. Hang on. I played with my compressor. All right, now it should be much better, guys. I do apologize if it's cutting out. Let me know. Still, thank you, no name. It should be better. I mean, it's either going to be better or I sound like I'm talking through the mic inside the mic. Okay, so what I'm saying is where's my Nobel Prize? Okay, that should be much better. All right, I just want to make sure. Okay. So, because I didn't hear the last 10 seconds of what you were saying because I was typing. So well, I can't multitask. This is a one man show. Damn it! It does. But hey, I just want to say for the record though, not only I decided I was gonna go live a half hour ago, I was on time, and I have Christmas decorations in the stream. I'm not really sure what that says or if it's great, but I think I was on. I'm pretty proud of myself. Like I was so on time, no one was here. Like I saw one viewer, and I was like, "Oh, that sucks." So, how was your Christmas Eve going?
triggering anti-vaxxers, telling conspiracy theorists they're nuts. I mean, the usual.
I'm thinking of I have a really good conspiracy that I want to bring up. Not sure if everyone's ready for it yet. I'm not ready for it yet, but I think I found a good one, and I want to hear the response. I'm not talking about right
Yeah.
now. Not right now.
I've got a conspiracy, but I'm not going to tell you because it's a conspiracy.
Exactly. and
What is it?
and I'm
Is it
doing
toast landing butter side down?
I'm doing. I have to get my quote unquote mind right, which I'm doing right now. Yeah, you go.
So
You're
how
good.
big's the...
You're good. Here, Nicole. Though it does sound like you guys are driving through a tunnel at the moment. It must be.
I'm trying to set up push to
I
talk.
knew it.
Hold on.
I knew it. I was gonna say it must be Crash on the line.
Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome. We have verified it. It is not Crash's Wi-Fi. It is Crash.
Bye, Crash. Yeah,
Talk-
what, oh,
No,
they're
I was
back.
gonna say because it's not showing who's talking.
Is that better?
There we go.
It's never better.
Oh, at least I'm consistent.
That is true. Hey, what's up, Twisted Hippie? Welcome. Put that link out there. I gotta keep remembering to put the Discord link because I still forget that I'm doing it on Discord now, which is so much better. Oh, so much better.
A little bit easy.
Yeah, much easier.
Cheaper.
Yeah, more control over who's here anyway.
Exactly, and that's the best part I like about it. I have control over actually have control over the panel. I can even control volume if I needed to. And it says,
well then why are you letting Crash in?
Because we were tricked, and I thought it was you, Nicole. We were tricked.
I keep y'all on your toes.
Yes. Crash put on some makeup. Pretending to be you.
Don't worry. don't worry. I have some Crash memes coming up pretty soon.
Oh, I figured you would have fun with the pics, Sean.
Oh yeah, it was my Christmas.
You need some corrupt toady memes.
Oh, don't think I forgot about that. You're good, Twisted. Yeah, don't think I forgot about that. Not at all.
I think I found the perfect theme song for that.
Is it some form of banjo music?
I posted the link in the hashtag corrupt toady room. It's Mud Cricket.
Mud Cricket. He said Mud Cricket. Really?
Sean, just real quick, type that into your YouTube search, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking
Being on, I'm going there now. And that's the other thing I like about it. You can just. I don't see it.
I posted the link. Hold on, let me check my phone.
What a two-bit operation. See, the good thing about you doing it through Discord is people have to post shit to your server room, and then you present it.
Yes.
So
much better. So much better. Yeah. So.
Got
So
a big bowl of conspiracy enabler with you there, Sean.
where's that?
Well,
There,
it's
check
normally
your
good.
inbox.
Ooh, getting personal.
I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not gonna show this at all. I will be looking at it vigorously when I get offline. I will tell you everything about it once I get offline.
I didn't say it was appropriate for the stream. I just said I think it's the perfect thing.
Okay, yeah.
So it's NSFW, right?
Yo, it's not good. Now, I have a question. So, Digital, you are the only person not showing up on my OBS when you talk.
That's probably because I'm not on push to talk.
I'm not on push to talk either.
Yeah, but you're the host.
Yeah, but God damn it.
Fuck you.
I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing it.
Yeah, I don't know, but you just need to hear me. See me.
That is true. That is very true.
I mean, I triggered Grim.
That's fun to
Because
do.
so Michio Kaku, he put out Big Think put out a thought of his about that shall not be mentioned and anti-vax, other sorts of conspiracies, and how he believes that he said it wrong, I reckon. He said we have a gene that makes us believe in magic and superstition.
Oh.
All that sort of stuff. Which, hey, you can't prove him wrong unless you're a bloody geneticist.
I'm not.
Right? But because it was him, Grim went on the defense. And I laughed. I said, don't worry about that it's him. Just listen to what he has to say about the pareidolia, superstition, and the fact that we will basically never get rid of conspiracy. They will always, they will either really happen or they will come to fruition through the fake news and the fake media proponents, you know, the ones that use pareidolia, pattern recognition, number files, and all that sort of stuff. So, but it's because it was him, Grim got triggered.
I think I was there for that. Was that I think didn't he just have it in with Slick right before that happened?
I'm not sure, because we were laughing and joking, and then I posted the video, and then all of a sudden, and I said, Grim, don't worry about who said it. Just worry about what it was that was said. What it said was that the thing with conspiracies, we're genetically predisposed to. But what if I had one of his Electric Universe guys say the same? Would he have been aggressive about it?
Probably. Might not.
Oh, that's right. It's Grim.
Yeah. Okay, so.
But then.
Hang on. I almost forgot. I almost forgot about this, so it's kind of topic changing. But because it's Christmas, I was wondering, do you guys know the origin of Christmas?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I know the original origins.
And that would be?
Nope.
Well, so there was this guy, Jeebus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly was born on Christmas Day, though they cannot confirm nor deny date of birth. You know, records lost. Mother who got pregnant without consent. That's being rude.
Yeah, that was a little. Yeah,
That's being rude.
Yeah, you reached a little on that one.
Yeah, the original story is of Saint Nicholas around 300 AD. who dropped a sack of gold down a chimney that fell into a stocking that was warming under the fire. So, because originally the hooks used to be underneath the ledge of the fireplace, and they would hang their long socks and whatever in there. Anyway, one of them happened to be open, and the sack of gold fell into it. That's where the stocking story came.
What if I told you you were wrong?
I'd tell you go fuck yourself, because that comes from Catholic historians.
Okay, what if I said you're still fucking wrong?
I would say you're a Christmas Grinch. Because if you're talking about the Santa that came around, I think it was the 1400s. That's a different story.
Okay, how about I tell you?
But it's based on you getting coal in your stocking tomorrow morning.
It's not going to happen.
Well, you're getting lead in yours.
Okay, so check this out. I'm going to see if this live feature works for the Discord, so you guys can follow me there and hear what I'm about to play. I'm going to play you guys the actual story of what I believe Christmas is. All right?
Oh, so it's a belief.
Oh, yeah, big time. and don't worry, I'm not reading anyone. It's going to be told by my bestest of best friends, Joe Rogan.
Oh, no.
You're going to say it like
Sean.
What?
His best friend's Eddie Bravo.
I've trained with him before, right? I've rolled with Eddie Bravo quite a few times.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't give a fuck that you've trained with him. Have you heard the crazy shit that comes out of his mouth?
Oh, yeah, but listen. No, okay. This is good, though. You ready? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, people don't know that the Christmas theme and the mushroom theme are so closely related. They're even the same color.
Right.
The Amanita mushroom is Santa Claus. It's white and red, you know? And it has a mycorrhizal relationship with certain coniferous trees, so that it grows only under those trees, just like packages under your fucking Christmas tree.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's really amazing. I mean, and people would gather them, and the way to dry them out was they would put them on the fucking trees, on the branches of the trees, so the sun would get them and it would dry them out. Awesome. It's like that's the ornaments on the trees. It's like all of it is there. It's like there's so many connections. And it's been argued that, someone told me that Coca-Cola was the first one to actually make a red and white Santa Claus, and then he was a different color before then. But that's not really true. There's evidence of red and white Santas from a long time ago.
Right.
But the Santa doesn't even matter. What really matters is the fucking presents under the tree, the way, the relationship that it has with the tree, the reason why we have Christmas trees, and they're always fucking pine trees, man. I mean, the whole thing, it's like, wow, the relationship's so close. The color of it, and the fact that we hang stockings over the fireplace, and those stockings, when the fuck did you ever get a pair of red and white stockings that you wore? You don't. But
don't do that too often.
But that's also how they dry mushrooms out in their home. They hang them in front of the fireplace, and that's what dries them out. It's
I
really
didn't know
incredible.
This one, actually.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know
dude,
at all.
It's
So
an
this is
incredible series of.
And that is the real story behind Christmas.
So Christmas is all about drugs.
Yes.
So because someone told you that people hung shrooms on trees, that's Christmas.
There's also reindeer involved.
Were they from a bad trip?
Jesus Christ.
Yes, Crash, it is a bad trip.
Listening to you is like a bad trip. It's like, is it me? Is it you?
We know it's him because he's consistent.
I know we do. I know. It's him. It has to be him.
But
I talk like this in real life too.
Yes, but Sean,
without a signal.
the origins of Christmas was the celebration of Jeebus' birth.
Of a virgin zombie birth.
Okay, yeah, so
why
Sean,
why do we celebrate in December?
Because we're fucking pagans.
I'm not a pagan. I mean, I've been.
You are so.
Huh? What is a pagan?
Do you celebrate Christmas?
Yeah, for my kid.
Right, you're a pagan.
What the fuck is a pagan? Stop calling me names. Stop throwing insults. I just want to know what a pagan is.
I want to clarify which pagan.
It is the worst thing in the world listening to Crash go, let me clarify.
Let me clarify, zombie.
Yeah.
Oh, Farmer's Boy.
Do you want to know what a pagan actually is?
Please tell me.
The official definition of pagan is a person holding religious beliefs other than those of the main world religions. So if you're not a Muslim, if you're not a Christian, anything like that, then you are considered a pagan. That's all it is.
Oh.
But it was basically used as an insult by the Christians when they were stamping out all the other religions. They were pagan religions.
Why are you being mean, Digital? I knew you were
Why
being
am I
insulted.
being mean? But it's true. You have a belief in something that is not according to mainstream religion.
Good. Mine is probably then mine is most likely has more truth to it than yours.
Well, don't make me bring up Saturnalia.
I don't know what the hell that, I don't even know what that is. So bring it.
Sean. Sean.
What?
It's Roman. It's an old Roman festival that just happened to happen in December, and it was basically, as the Romans were wont to do, it was a piss up. The Romans were very good at having parties and enjoying themselves, and that was their festival in December. One of the many pagan festivals that Christianity sort of stamped out and subsumed, and that became Christmas.
Okay, so was Christmas ever celebrated in March?
Only by
no,
heathens.
because that's a totally different festival. That's what Easter became.
Okay, wait. Isn't Easter when he fucking come out of the cave or something?
Okay. Easter.
Let me
Easter
make something.
is in April.
Let me make something real clear.
No.
I don't know a damn thing about
Easter
religion,
moves,
so
Easter moves between March and April.
Yes.
Oh, see, that's why I thought it was in March.
Well, sometimes it's in March, sometimes it's in April. It's how it's calculated. It's something to do with the moon.
But what is it for? What is it supposed to be, quote unquote, celebrating?
Well, okay, in the Christian religion, Easter is the resurrection of Christ. It's the
supposed zombification of someone who died on a cross, who would have actually been thrown into a pit with the rest of the heretics that would have been crucified in, because tombs were only meant for hierarchy.
Yes, and
Jesus had no money.
No. He definitely didn't classify as one of the upper classes.
Yeah, if he had aristocracy, then he would have been put in a tomb. So it's quite fascinating that this peasant carpenter Messiah, as he was, got crucified, got treated like absolute crap, and there's no records of anyone else being treated the way he was treated, right? Then gets slung up on a cross for 3 days, gets a hole poked in him by a spear and has the blood drained out of him, right? Then gets put in a tomb and a rock gets put in front of it, a giant rock the size of a person, right? Then apparently 2 women or 3 women, depending on who's telling the story, go to the tomb 3 days later. The rock has moved and Jesus is gone.
Yeah, well, you see, what they forgot to do was they forgot to go for the headshot, because that's the only way to kill a zombie. They're all worshipping a Jewish zombie.
I think we broke Sean.
No. I was our past Soul Survivor sent me a PayPal, and appreciate it, man. I thought there's no message on it, and I don't want to show it because I don't want to dox you, but I did appreciate the hell out of that. So,
Good man.
oh, he said, okay, I found it. It says, "Merry Christmas from Soul Survivor." Thank you, sir.
So did you like our little story there, Sean?
I did. It was cute.
Well, that's the thing. Ours is what has been written in the Bible. That story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're taking the piss out of it because of the fact that he had no money. He was crucified. Most crucifixions, there was a pit behind the crucifixion mound or whatever, where they would just throw the dead bodies after crucifixion. The fact that they took him down, untied him or unnailed him, cleaned his wounds, moved him into a tomb, and put a rock in front of it.
Well, he was special.
He didn't pay for the room.
He wasn't. He wasn't special.
Okay, so wait. Okay, what the fuck are we? Wait, then what is Christmas celebrated for?
Jesus' birth.
But he wasn't born in December.
No,
that's not the point. It's metaphorical.
Why?
Because Christians are crazy.
Yep.
Oh.
I know that because I was a born-again Christian. They're more nuts than the Catholics.
Wait.
Not all Christians are crazy.
I think there's a lot of crazies on all sides. I think the best thing you could do is basically not have a religion at all. That's like honestly like they all say they're all like, this is all I know. This isn't exact 100% obviously, but it's like, wait, I don't even explain it. It's like here's the story, and oh, by the way, there's only one God. There's only one. Don't let any other God tell you they're the God. There is no other God except for me. But if they all say that, one of those, it means all the gods are lying except for one. And of course, your religion is the one that's not lying. But how do you know?
Of course.
Well, that's the problem with religions. Are you believing in the right God? I mean, even in the Christian religion, what is the first commandment? The first commandment isn't "I am the only God." The first commandment is "You shall worship no other gods than me," which means there are other gods.
Yeah, but Yahweh sucks. Just case in point: Noah, Abraham, Job, Lot,
Jib.
And in the Old Testament, God had a hitman. Do you know?
Huh?
Oh, you don't know.
You're good to go, Carlos.
Well, here's the deal. Depending on how scared you are, determines how many religions you need to believe in at the moment.
Ah, right. None.
If you're not scared, you don't need any of them. But
nope.
The more frightened you get, the more you want to believe in all of them.
Yeah.
Well, wait. Wouldn't religion be the... Okay, so you guys are going to hate me for this one. Wouldn't religion be the same thing as science in the aspect of not knowing and wanting to know more? In that you kind of have comfort, right?
No. Stop. Go.
Hey, you should be able to
equating
talk.
religion to science
hang on,
is heathenistic, silly talk.
Okay, you're good to go now, Carlos. I apologize. I did. You were
serving me. Am I still working now?
Yeah. I saw you lighting up, but I couldn't hear you, so I fixed it. You're good now.
Excellent. So now I can do a rebuttal.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, I forgot. What's up, Carlos?
I'm
Go
just gonna
ahead, my
say-
friend.
Get him, Carlos.
No, he had a good point talking about how the people who were crucified normally they were thrown in a pit. Well, Nicodemus paid for all that. That's why he was put in the tomb. He wasn't gonna let them take Jesus's body and get thrown in the pit. So he took him down. He paid, and that's why that happened.
Who paid
Nicodemus.
for him to be in that tomb?
Yes. He was the one that paid for all that. They told him to go back and he could do whatever he wanted with the body, and then he put him in a tomb out of respect or whatever. So yeah, but normally,
Why?
yeah, he would because he was Jesus. He had a relationship with him. He knew him.
Okay, it wasn't just like a. It was
No, he wasn't. Yeah, no, he wasn't some random person. You know, at the beginning when Jesus was getting all his disciples, you know, he did talk to Nicodemus, and he didn't follow him, but he met him. He knew who he was, and I think because of that, you know, he actually went and he didn't want to allow for Jesus to be thrown in a pit, you know, and to rot or whatever. Anyway, Merry Christmas to everybody, and God bless you all.
I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a
Merry
question.
Christmas.
Sure.
What is Christmas to you?
And multiple things. Because Christmas, as we know it in the United States with the tree and everything, that has nothing to do with the birth of Christ. Of course, you know, as you guys mentioned earlier, he wasn't even born around this time of the year. But you know, we take the opportunity that, you know, we have this days off to, you know, get together with family and eat together and also, you know, remember the birth of Christ and all that stuff. So some people who are not Christian, they celebrate Christmas, you know, just because it's a time of, you know, with family getting together and, you know, giving gifts to each other and whatnot. So, you know, we can all argue about where this whole tradition of the tree and gift come from, but you know, at the end of the day, Christian or not, you know, they'll celebrate that. But of course, us Christians, you know, we actually commemorate the birth of Christ.
Yeah, the giving of gifts is just symbolic of the
and I don't even
wise men. Yeah.
Right, and I don't even know if that's originally comes from, you know, the three wise men bringing gifts to baby Jesus or whatnot, or if it's just a pagan tradition. I know the tree most likely is, but you know, it's just more.
I'm sure the tree is. I don't think that has anything to do with it. The
I
giving
can,
of gifts though is symbolic of
I can
the
bring out
wise men bringing
Catholicism if you want.
Blue?
gifts to the baby.
Blue,
Huh?
I got a question.
Yeah. I've got spare answers. I probably got answers I hadn't even used yet.
A couple 100 years ago, did they give presents on Christmas?
Oh hell yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
We've always done that.
Okay.
Big Blue, can you sing Silver Bells for me?
Can I sing?
Yeah, just do that line, Silver Bells.
Yeah, you'd really hate it if I did that.
You have an awesome
So would everybody
voice.
else. So would everybody else. I don't sing that. I do not sing.
You got to know your limits.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I feel Blue only has two levels. That's talk and yell.
Yeah,
but
pretty much.
I do have to roll out, guys. Merry Christmas to everybody, and thank you for
Carlos.
for being respectful to me, even though we don't agree on certain things. You know, it just goes to show that we can disagree and still be civil.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. And Merry Christmas to you and your family too, sir.
All right, later.
Merry Christmas, Carlos.
Bye.
I don't like Carlos now that he's gone. You know, his views on the religion are fucking crazy. Holy shit.
Now, why didn't you say that when he was in here?
I'm just kidding. But for real.
Yes, but technically, Carlos, if you're still listening, you did straw man me. I said Jesus didn't pay for the tomb.
It's just straw magic.
when we get Ken and Carlos both doing the crazy ass shit, I feel like I need to have my computer exercised or something.
Oh no!
Given an exorcism, that's what I was trying to say.
Yes, you get it exorcised.
Exort, yeah.
Yeah, rather than exercised.
Yeah.
Carlos has got the best crazy eyes of anybody. No doubt
okay.
about it.
I was gonna try to remember this. I was looking for Barney because I started listening over the couple days that I wasn't streaming. I was listening to like old streams that I had, and Barney had said something in a conversation. And Blue, you can actually probably maybe speak on this because maybe you heard about it. But Barney said that the universe isn't flat. He said that the universe is actually a negative, which would be the universe is quote unquote in the crunch, right?
What did Barney say?
Yes, he said this. He said this on a live stream. I have it recorded and everything. Hang on. Look, I even wrote it down.
But Sean,
hang on.
Sean, if you do,
let me say what he said in his quote. He said, "Curvature of space, thus to be thought to be flat. Now studies say universe is negative, meaning universe is sphere." End quote.
How does that make sense?
That's what he said. That's what he said. So if anyone knows where Barney is, find him. Find him. Bring me his head.
Find him. I want to question him because all the energy and matter.
Is he saying the universe is?
Sorry, Blue.
Saying the universe is a sphere?
Yes, he says it, which would ultimately be the crunch. Is what I would take from that, right?
Well, that would be the. No. Why would that be the crunch?
No. Well, the negative would be the blah blah blah, the saddle, right?
I don't understand that.
Okay, hang on. Actually, I can show you guys because I do.
Sean.
Oh.
No. I'm not crazy.
You better have your science game.
I am. I know what he's talking about.
Cool.
Let me show you. When you see this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. No. When you see this,
that's what Blue said.
Hang on, I know, but you'll know exactly what I'm talking about right now. Hang on, and I'm going to share it on YouTube, so don't worry. Can you guys see that? I just put it in. I put it in the wrong one. Hang on. Here we go.
We're looking.
Crash. In the live stream text.
What about?
Who?
Oh. Yeah.
So that means if he's saying it's closed, right? That'd be the negative.
I don't know what he's talking about. Barney gets off in all this weird shit.
I know, that's why I wanted to bring it up. But for him saying a sphere, then we're talking closed, obviously. And as far as I know,
doesn't mean negative.
Okay,
does not mean negative.
But he said sphere, and that's the closest one.
Sean.
God damn it! What?
Let me science the fuck out of you right now. He can't make that determination because we can't see that fucking far.
I know. He's saying studies are showing that it most likely is closed.
Yeah, most likely.
Okay, but that's what I said.
Sean, look, it shows you 3 models, and all 3 of those could possibly be right.
Yeah, but
none of them are conclusive.
Yes, but as the calculations have shown, that they known it to be flat, meaning that everything they're looking at is going on a flat trajectory away from them.
Yeah, I know a star that's going to put a hole in that bubble.
Okay, so what if it's not flat? Then tell me.
Well, Polaris?
What about it?
Okay, so if it's flat, how can it be above us?
Okay, again, I'm about to science the fuck out of you. You ready? You ready?
Also, here's the other question.
No. You ready?
How can Sigma Octantis be below you?
Okay, let me science the fuck out of you. Remember, everything we talk about is everywhere and in every direction. So everything that we're looking at is going in a direction. Am I wrong?
Well, that depends on your frame of reference, Sean.
Earth.
Is it?
Or better yet, quote unquote, the Big Bang. Because actually that's what I should be saying, right? That's actually what I should be saying, not Earth. It should be from the Big Bang, right?
Yeah. Okay. So just a little thing. You know that cone of silence that they put out, that it goes from the Big Bang and then expanded a little bit and then expanded real lot. It got real hot, right? And then expands. Okay, that's just an analogous timeline, right? But when in actual fact it expanded in every direction all at the same time.
Okay, but that's what we see though. So that cone that they're giving us, that cone is what we see, not what everything did. That's also the kind of the thing I was listening to people talk about, and they were saying stuff like the Big Bang says that was the beginning of the universe, and that's no. It's the beginning of the known universe, as far as I know, right? The visible universe.
No.
Okay, explain it then, because before the Big Bang, you're telling me there was nothing. It was a
but
void.
You just conflated visible universe to the Big Bang.
Isn't that what it is? Isn't that all we see?
No, the Big Bang okay,
So the cone that we see the Big Bang, and they illustrate the cone.
That cone is a fucking timeline.
Yes, but that's all we can see, though. We can see past that. Everything on the outside of that cone can we see?
No, Sean,
Answer the question.
Forget the cone. Forget the cone.
No, I'm not forgetting the cone, because the cone is where we can't see outside of that cone, can we?
We see in all directions, Sean.
Okay,
we don't see
but when we
conical,
wait, are you telling me when we
doesn't
look
appear conical?
Okay, we got a problem. We got a problem. Hang on.
Because if it's conical, how come it's not in your little picture here?
Hang on, I'm about to bring it up right now. You tell me.
I will tell you.
You better. Bringing it up right now. Right fucking now.
Where is it, Sean?
Wait, man, damn.
It's over there.
Yeah, hang on, I'm getting it.
Mr. Smith, Merry Christmas.
What's up, sir? What's up, Mr. Logo? How you doing?
Merry Christmas.
Fine, thank you.
Okay,
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that's it. That's a timeline representation, Sean.
Okay, now we're going to explain it, because you are going to clarify it for me. You wanted to science the fuck out of me? Let's science the fuck out of me now. Okay, so when we look at this graph... Okay, go ahead.
So far, the Planck time is the limit, I think. As far as I know, we cannot see further back.
Yes.
And there is no point in making assertions further back. I mean, when there are hypotheses, then, but this is not part of the theory.
Okay, but is it okay? So where in this timeline? If you guys go to the live thing, you'll probably be able to see my cursor. Where in this timeline are we?
Yeah, it's a singularity. It's like a function of whatever 1 over x for larger and larger x. It becomes smaller and smaller and more dense and smaller, and then you get to the Planck time, and that is not zero. It just stops there. But it's not zero and it's not nothing.
Okay, but
so there was never nothing. There's no evidence for nothing. What is that even supposed to be?
I know, that's what I mean. That's what doesn't make sense to me. But the thing but this is very important. I need to know in this picture, where are we?
Okay, Sean.
Yes.
Just to clarify, do you see the line at the bottom of that picture that tells you how many years?
Yes, the Big Bang expansion.
It's a fucking timeline.
Okay, motherfucker. I get
right.
that. Now let's clarify something.
Okay, you agree. Where are we? We are at the end.
Okay.
We are at the end of that
very
picture.
end. Okay.
Right?
Okay, perfect. Hang on.
Okay,
stop,
remove the cone.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll move it.
And make everything everywhere.
You know what? F you guys. I'm bringing out the paint. Hang on.
Because with that description, it's showing time going forward. It will not go backwards. That's not possible.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But we can look back. You can't. That's not impossible. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we can see light from billions of years ago.
Okay, so here we go. Where's my little paint stick? Damn it. Here it is. Got my paint stick. Can you guys see this? No one can see it. Fuck. How did I do that? I don't remember. Oh, I think I know how. There we go.
Sean.
Aha.
No.
Sean.
No. No. Hang on.
Ooh.
Thank you. No.
Ooh.
Hang on. Give me a second.
Nope.
You're all hanging out here on Christmas Eve. Do you guys have no life or what?
Hey, just turn a knot in it.
There it is.
Okay.
Time for me to mess y'all up because it's Christmas Day here and I'm waiting for my children to wake up for presents.
It's not. That's not stop saying that. That's not even funny anymore.
I've still got 2 hours and 40 minutes to go yet.
Okay, here we go. Now you guys.
I just want to know if Mel Gibson is a good leader over there in the post-apocalyptic upside down land.
You guys are confusing the hell out of me right now, and I don't know what's
You guys been screwing with the moon again?
Okay,
They got their own moon.
I have an idea. All right, I fixed it. I know how to do this now. Hang on, let me go here. And I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see the ink. I know the people on YouTube will, so I guess.
Yeah, Sean.
What, man? I'm trying to show you something and make you wrong.
Can you read the date on that screenshot I just posted?
No, I'm not looking at your fucking screen. I'm doing my own thing.
Well, because it's doing two things for you, Sean. First, it's giving you the temperature for the day at the moment. But it also gives you the date in the correct format.
Yes,
you're supposed to read the temperature.
Okay, yeah. What is it?
22.
Wait, damn. That's a
That's
lot
cold.
lower than 40.
It's a fuck ton lower than 40.
That's
it's
climate
60
change.
here today.
Okay, so check this out. This is off topic, but I got to get it out. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I've been hearing this a lot lately, is temperatures are fluctuating apeshit everywhere. So I've now decided, thanks to fucking Davros here, what I must do is go into the research data and start logging temperatures for this year, probably back another 5 years. Thank you, Davros. And basically, I'm going to show you guys that climate change is as fucking real as it gets.
Yeah, do you realize that last week Australia was classified as the hottest country on Earth?
That is insane.
Last week it was 19 and snowing here, and today it's 60 and sunny.
Yeah. See? There you go.
I'm only about 9 degrees above you right now, Crash.
Crash. How normal is that at this time of year?
It's not.
Yeah.
It should be like 30 with 3 foot of snow on the ground.
Yeah, we in Europe could get actually colder weather when the whole Earth is warming.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. People think it's what's going to happen is like all of a sudden big areas are going to just change, and it's going to be like pockets of everywhere that are going to start changing. And when they start the fun, geoengineering project that they plan to do, that's going to be when it gets interesting because we have no idea what a uniformed blanket over everywhere is. Again, we've never had a volcano actually cover the world, and
well,
not a good idea.
We have. We just weren't alive for it.
No, we haven't.
Let me put it in perspective. When I was a kid and a teenager, it used to be viable to own a snowmobile for transportation around here this time of year. And now I can comfortably ride my motorcycle with a light jacket.
Yeah, see.
But that's because you're heavily insulated, Crash.
It's a counterbalance for work, damn it.
Can you write that off on your taxes? Oh, wait, time out. Back to what we were discussing.
Hang on, you just ask him if he can get a refund on his counterbalance, and you're like, no, fuck that.
Okay, so if you guys can see on the live screen, can you guys see me drawing on this little diagram?
I can't.
Okay, well, too bad.
Oh, wait a minute. My live stream's not running. That's why I can't see it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't have a live stream. I had a dead stream.
Well, Blue, at least you can you can look at the YouTube screen. If you guys go to the YouTube, it'll make more sense what I'm doing, because this has to be answered. Because I don't understand it. You guys are telling me this illustration. Well, let's find out. Ooh,
with that little yellow dot.
Yes, there you go. Perfect. You said we're at
the end. Do you realize that little yellow dot compared to that picture is
I know. Oh, stop it, Davros. Stop it. Stop. I know damn well that this is not to scale for shit. Okay, we know this.
Okay, it's just representative of our possible location.
Yes.
Well, we're not.
So can okay, fine. We're here. That better? Is that
Don't make
better?
me find you a video.
No, I'm not gonna watch it. Actually, we can watch it. I don't care. But
actually, you probably couldn't.
Why?
But I can find you a video that explains our position in the observable universe.
Hang on. No, fuck that out. We don't need that right now. This is just you're sciencing me. Remember? Come on. Hang on. Okay, so we can see in this direction, correct?
No.
Why?
We see in every direction.
Stop it. Stop it. Right now, we are talking about this diagram, and we live in the diagram. So we're understanding what this diagram is telling us. Okay.
Yeah, what if I told you? What if I told you observable universe is around 92 billion light years?
I don't mean we can see that far. I just mean we can see in that direction, Davros. You're conflating.
Yes.
Okay, so
Davros, your scroll is showing.
In my science scroll.
Okay, Davros. We can see in that direction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can we see in this direction?
Yes.
Okay. Can we see in this direction?
Anywhere you put that arrow, I'm going to say yes.
Okay, and we can see in this direction?
Yes.
Okay. When we look, we see in this direction, we see the microwave background, right?
Yes.
Okay. We can't see past it.
No, this is actually not correct. The whole thing represents a time. That x-axis is a time, so we cannot see in that back and forth direction. That is just a time. You can see into the future,
but we can't see we can see into the future. You're right, but that's not okay. Here's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, so in this direction, now it's pink. That direction, we see the microwave background. Okay, where this is depicted, do we see up here, like out here? Is what's out here?
Unicorns.
More space stuff.
Okay, but we can see out
more
there.
Space stuff.
But in this illustration, not realistically, because again, that we're just helping me understand that all that pink area on the top of everywhere, we can see out there, right?
Okay, so this is the problem that the logo was trying to explain to you. What you're doing is you're trying to make a representation of the universe using a timeline graph to say, can we look forward? What people might be thinking is, are we looking into the future? No, we are not. We are looking into the past.
No.
So
okay.
it's directionally right.
How about this? The direction in which Earth is traveling in the universe. Do we know that direction?
Yeah, it's around the galactic axis.
What we can see is the whole thing is a cone. What we can see, the further a star is away, the further back in time. So the whole thing, what we can see, is a cone.
Wait.
Well,
So
when the x-axis is a time scale.
Wait. So the red stars that we see aren't ahead of us; they're behind us.
No, they're moving away.
Okay, my bad.
They're moving away. So red shift going away, blue shift coming toward.
Yay!
That's it. That's all it is.
Okay.
So the further away, the further back in time of that red arrow, right?
Okay.
That is what I would say. Yeah.
I want to find a better depiction then. Can you find one real quick for me? Because you understand what I'm saying though. Like, okay, I need something that would show the direct. Is there something that shows the direction that we travel?
Give me some.
I doubt that anyone is understanding what you're saying here.
Yeah, give me a minute, and I'll find you a picture of our position in the Libra system of the Milky Way inside the observable universe. I will find it for you, and we are not in the fucking center.
Oh, I didn't. God damn it!
No, I'm just pushing the point.
Because I trust me, I also get the fact that that illustration that I was drawing on, I get that each dot is a fucking galaxy. Okay, I get it. I get it. You know what I mean, though.
Yeah. Sean, I understand what you are trying to explain. The cone is representative of the timeline of what's happened to the expansion of the universe, right? So if you were to take our position on that cone, you would have to flip it and make it flat. But that's not exactly what they mean by flat.
Exactly.
Yeah, some buzzing going on, Davros.
Yeah, it's Davros.
Give me a second.
Sound like someone's tasing you while you talk.
Playing
I
with
don't
that,
care.
playing with the vibrator again.
Merry Christmas.
You weren't supposed to open that till tomorrow.
I keep telling
Digital's
them.
happy.
Yeah, I'm doing the crash thing.
Damn.
Hey, you know what's in between all those galaxies, Sean?
What's that, sir?
I can tell you what's in between all those galaxies.
What's that?
Gas pressure without a container.
Yes.
Not very much. 10 to the minus 17th Thor, but there's a little bit of gas pressure out there without a container.
Isn't the universe containing it, though?
With what?
Itself.
But what?
Dark matter. You want to go there?
Has it got a fence?
Hey,
has it got a fence or a
You
box around it?
You don't know that. You don't know.
Yeah. So how can you make the wild assertion that there is?
Easy.
What? How?
There's
how can
something.
You easily
there's
make
something.
The assertion about
there's
something I can't see.
There's something there. There's something there that affects the universe and affects the universe and its expansion. What? What?
Yeah, it keeps growing.
I'm telling you right now. Contained. I'm going to tell you right now. Dark energy is what makes galaxies. What?
You can't. Okay, you can't.
You can't say I'm wrong. You can't say I'm wrong.
Contain something.
Can you say I'm wrong?
How can it continue to expand?
Because the contain gets larger. It's not contained. It's contained. It's not containing. It's a container.
Oh fuck me!
It doesn't need to be contained.
This is Riley level of description.
No, it doesn't need to be contained. It needs to be container. That's what gravity is. Gravity is a container. It's not it doesn't contain. It doesn't need a lid. What?
Or is gravity a retardant?
No.
And
well,
there are some...
actually, you know what? It could be. As far as I know, I believe in a graviton. I think it's out there. So I think that the push-pull is very real. I think it's very possible, and I understand it. Yes,
Woohoo!
that's right.
I indoctrinated
I'm
Sean.
telling you right now,
Yay!
guys, I have changed my view on gravity. I am no longer Newtonian. I am very much so Newtonian and Einstein. They are both right. And in a sense, we feel both effects.
Digital, you broke our Sean.
No, I didn't.
How am I wrong?
You always say Einstein. It's Einstein.
Oh,
Hey, I'm American. It's Einstein.
Yeah, and you also the
If
fun
he
thing
was
with
here, if he was here, it would be Einstein. I agree, but he's not here.
Yeah.
It's Einstein.
Okay.
Damn it.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you right now, if Einstein was here, I wouldn't say a damn word. I would have to worry about how to say his name. I would just shut the fuck up. I'd first be kind of scared.
I would be sitting there going, "What? You're saying relativity is special? Wow! Tell me more."
I also find it funny how you pronounce the of our reformer. You always say Luther, but it's Luther, not Luther.
Yep.
He's a looter. What,
Hang on.
did he incite
I
riots?
I had this argument with some Australians earlier yesterday, and I need to make this very clear. And I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this. Digital, you were there for this. You guys are the foreigners. You guys are the ones that are saying shit weird, not us. Just so you know. Oh, farmers, you were there too.
Bloody foreigners.
Oh yeah, we can have that debate here right now if you guys like.
Well, my coffee just went back into its cup.
Sean, they're upside down, and Mel Gibson is their leader. So
Actually, that's wrong.
He is their god, not leader.
It's Paul Hogan.
Yeah.
Paul Hogan.
Wait. What? Wouldn't Steve Irwin be better?
No,
Yeah,
definitely
but-
Paul Hogan.
no,
Damn,
Steve
you guys-
Irwin.
Because you guys say Crocodile Dundee, but
Hey.
like, we remember him from
Hey,
before
Davros.
Crocodile Dundee.
Yes, I remember him from before that as well. Yeah.
Whatever you did, Davros, you fixed it. I can see you on OBS now.
Steve
'cause I dropped
Irwin.
out, came back in.
Steve Irwin was not in Thunderdome. Okay, 2 men enter, 1 Aussie leaves.
You are correct. He definitely
Yeah,
was
but
not.
Angry Anderson was also in that film, and so was Tina Turner.
Yeah.
Really? Tina Turner? You got... Oh, God. Wait.
Yeah.
Stop. Whoa. Do not go all fucking dork on me right now, guys. And I
What
want to say
about
that,
a
too. I'm going to tell you now.
About
I know...
post-apocalyptic movie?
I know every single one of you guys. I know. I hear it all. I've seen it all. I know when you guys are doing your little Star Trek monologues and stuff and breaking it down. I know who's there. I know who's involved in that. And I know when you guys start doing it. So guess what? I'm going to call it out.
Sean, I've got a question for you.
What?
What does God need with a starship?
A place to keep his honeys. I don't know.
No, it's for the Exodus.
I don't know what the fuck that is. You say that. I don't know what it means. What is the Exodus?
Exodus was when a certain flood guy / Ten Commandments guy. Oh no, yeah, Moses and the Red Sea thing. He's the one who took the Israelite slaves from Egypt, which there's no record of, on a fucking 40-year trek through the desert that would have taken them 2 weeks if they walked in the right bloody direction.
Yeah.
They got lost.
Yeah, going from Egypt across
Yeah.
the Suez
Spent
into Israel.
40 years wandering in the desert only to pick the one spot in the entire region that doesn't have any oil under it.
Yep. That's doing well.
Sounds like
Not
they
to
got
mention, yeah, what form of alchemy or whatever did he do to part the Red Sea?
Ooh, wait, time out. You know what? I think
But
alchemy could be real.
Alchemy is real.
We
I know
can?
someone who proved it.
Really? I was kidding.
Look up
Well,
Rutherford.
speaking of Exodus, that's what I'm about to do. I got to go finish a video.
All right, sir.
Oh, wonder who.
To drop in, just wish you guys a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas,
Yeah.
Blue.
Merry
Merry Christmas.
And if you guys are up late tonight, I may talk to you again. Whatever.
Cool.
Sounds like a plan.
Oh,
Anyway.
I'll probably be
Yeah, you-
wrapping presents or something.
Hey,
Yeah,
Blue,
me
who's
too.
this video?
Because it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
But it's where you are.
What's up, Crash?
You know, it's Christmas Eve everywhere.
I said, who's this video going to be about?
Oh, it's hopefully the final saga of that guy.
Yeah, you wish.
He's making a late run for Dumb Fuck of the Year.
Yeah, I realize that. He's not going to get in there this year, but he'll be first on the list next year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he promises he'll take his channel down if we prove him wrong, and I'm proving him wrong right now.
You
Oh,
realise
snap.
that there is no goalpost. You know that, right? It's in perpetual motion, but you cannot see it.
Yeah. After this, I'm just going to ignore him.
Hey, Sean, I just wanted to say, that's a badass painting in the background, but your tree looks broke, dude. I'm so sorry. I had to say it though. It's just special.
But that's what. Yeah, that like I don't really care about a tree really, but I was like, oh, this is funny, this is hilarious. So I picked it up. It was like $10, and I was like, oh yeah, this will work.
I'm gonna keep that up.
Oh my god!
I have it showing. I'm gonna just show that. That's a special tree. That's a new Truth Army tree.
Yeah.
That guy done put a turbo interceptor motor in the goalpost.
Sean, I found you a meme that is also science.
Okay. Let's see.
Sean has enough work on memes of me, apparently.
Ooh, I am tomorrow. That's gonna be a Christmas special. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so
What, a meme special?
yes. Oh, I have memes of everybody. You guys are crazy. You guys, I've made the warning so many times now that it's just goalpost city now. Now you know, you showed yourselves. I got Christmas stuff now. It's gonna be fun. The whole time, the whole stream is just gonna like a slideshow. It's gonna be special.
At least I posted sexy pictures of me.
Oh, Crash, I mean mainly you. You have given me a special Christmas gift. You have no fucking idea. Oh, you have no idea, Crash. Oh, I'm gonna show him, and then we'll rate on whether or not I'm coming out there. We'll see how upset you are first.
I don't get upset. I just want to get in a ring with Nathan Thompson.
Hey, I'll get in a ring with you. Oh, MMA rules, though.
Damn it, I just had knee surgery. You know damn well I can't kick.
Ooh, I can. I can. I know how to kick.
Sean, do you know the story of the tar?
I'm gonna tell you right now.
The tar baby.
Oh no, I don't. Is it a size David Goliath type
the tar
story?
baby? No, the tar baby. Oh dear, Sean, you've lived such a sheltered life.
It sounded kind of racist. Have a good Christmas, Blue.
I'm not quite butterbean sized, but I am pretty good sized.
Oh, that's why the first thing that's going to happen, Crash, is I'm going to take you down. Well, first I'll kick your other leg, but I'm going to kick the shit out of your leg probably for about 10 minutes as I run around like a wounded animal. And then the second you think you're going to get close enough, I'm going to take you down, and then you're in my world.
Yeah, just hope he doesn't fall on you, Sean.
Oh no, I know how to take people down. I'm not worried about that. Yes.
Before you do that, I need to start a video.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely.
It'll be fun, but that's about Sean's only chance because if I can get him cornered and keep him stood up, I think I stand a chance.
Oh, you're gonna knock me out. You're probably gonna knock me out. That's the whole basis of the game plan. That's why I have one. That's the best part. I've sparred against some big dudes. I'm talking. The biggest dude I've ever actually sparred he was about 245, but he was like, if anyone knows, like Overeem size looking. If you know who Overeem is, you know exactly what I mean. But it was not fun. I've never been knocked out, but I was definitely knocked down, and it hurt a lot.
I've been hit hard enough by somebody that I don't remember anything except the lights going out.
Hang on one sec.
And that was a big boy. He weighed about 450 pounds.
Ah.
Yeah. What were you saying? And for the record, RT, yes, I am in very much so the Christmas spirit. Don't be all too quick to talk, people.
Sorry, I was busy on the other screen.
Sorry, I was doing some goddamn research for you, Sean. Jeez, man. By the way, in space, no one can hear your meme.
Yes, they can.
Fart.
How can they hear a meme?
Because there is atmosphere.
How can you hear a meme?
You say it.
No, how can you hear the meme?
You listen to it.
No, that's
You don't just
stating it.
you don't just hear
That's
it, Davros.
you making the noises. You don't hear it. You see it. My God, your philosophy's fucked.
That's like saying, how do you smell yellow?
Ammonia?
No, yellow. How do you smell yellow? What
ammonia.
What does next Tuesday taste like?
Pancakes. Come on, I can do this all day.
Yeah, but you're wrong.
How do you, oh, okay, it might be bacon, but it depends. Is it Tuesday next March, or is it...
It's all our bollocks.
Yes.
But yes, in space, nobody can hear you fart.
Sure, they'll disagree. Because it'll vibrate your spacesuit.
Yeah, if you're in your spacesuit on an open channel.
Oh, just imagine being in the spacesuit and just letting an absolute ripper go, and it's like, no, you can't escape the smell. It's just
And it gets coated in your oxygen scrubbers.
Stinky. Mind you, I guess like a lot of things, they have to be careful.
You realise Sean's packing a pipe right now, and he's getting way hot.
Yes.
So what? Why you
yeah,
gotta
there you go.
Wait, why you gotta call me out like that? That's fucked up.
Because you went all quiet.
It's like when you're talking to Druss and he sounds like he's talking from the other side of the room. That's because he's leaning out the window smoking a cigarette. You always know when he's having a smoke.
And then he rests it on the ledge, and then he comes back in, makes his statement, and then fucks off.
It goes back over again. You can hear it. It's like, yeah, you're over at the window smirking the tab, aren't you?
I wonder if he leans way out when he does it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Alright, the dogs with floppy ears on the side. Off you go. Cats, small ears, inside.
That's so weird. Why do you say that?
Okay, so the story of Noah's flood, right? Sean Connery was playing Moses.
I know that.
Right, and he's talking about his speedboat and how he could have all the animals with the long ears on the side, so they flap in the wind.
That's it. Yeah. Long is out, short is in.
I'm trying to find Sean a video that he can watch in his own time and go, whoa.
Good luck.
Oh yes, I see. RT96 has made a similar comment about farting in spacesuits. When the Apollo capsules splash back down, as he says, they always had like a Navy guy, like a frogman or something, to swim over and open the hatch. And they do reckon that when they opened the hatch, the smell was just, unbearable. Because basically these three guys had been living in the Apollo capsule for quite some time, which didn't have a separate enclosed toilet. In fact, there is a recording somewhere, and I can't remember which Apollo mission it is, but one of the astronauts is saying, "Whose turd is this?" as it floated past him. And they reckon that the three astronauts got used to the smell, but the poor bugger who opened the hatch, yeah, stinky.
Is that where this stream has come to?
Yep. And that's all true. One of the Apollo astronauts was taking a shit, and they generally shit into a bag, and one got loose and drifted past one of his crew members.
I had a phone call. What fun did I miss?
Oh no, we're not going to repeat it. Don't worry about it. Oh no. We're definitely.
Oh, that's RT96. That's more appropriate. Apollo 8's Christmas Eve message.
What the crap are we talking about?
Yeah,
That's
no, we're not.
appropriate.
We're not talking. No, we're not
No.
repeating it anymore.
No.
We were talking about me getting in the ring with Sean, and then I had a phone call, and then
Oh, we can talk about that. It's gonna be again.
No, I'd much rather you got in the ring with Nathan Thompson. I'd pay to watch that.
Oh yeah, it's
I've been trying to
one.
get him in a ring. I told him that I would set it up for charity, that he could donate whatever he wanted to.
I bet if you offer to buy a bunch of his shirts, he will.
Because his increased bone density and muscle strength and everything from starving himself is making him so strong.
Because he's a bonehead.
Yeah.
But you do know that. Wait, how much does he weigh?
At last I heard on one of his streams, he was down to like 180 something.
He's about three Rogans tall.
What's that in stone?
I think he's just trying to make that his brand and to sell it somehow.
Oh yeah, he's already said he's like a cook or something.
I've got over 100 pounds on him, and I'm pretty sure I got about 6 inches of reach on him.
If you guys want to have a laugh, just look up what's his name? Nathan Thompson playing guitar and singing. I mean,
did you upload
I understand
it? Did you upload
it? No.
Did you upload it?
No, I didn't upload it.
Because I can upload it.
No.
Oh, no, not that one.
I'm talking about they had a special moment. I don't care what's going on. I don't care what's happening. I don't care what's going on. I will always remember that fucking day. The day that I witnessed Carlos and Nathan a bonding. And then I saw the courting start.
Shut up. I give you permission to snip out the part of him singing a song to me to show that. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm showing. I want to show the whole thing because it was unreal. I heard it was crazy. Believe it or not, I heard Nathan Thompson talk like a human.
No, I don't believe you.
No.
Oh my God, Carlos!
I think the world deserves that.
Carlos and Nathan, they talked. They did not. They weren't bullshitting. They weren't. It had nothing to do with. It had nothing to do with science. It was about court. Like Nathan courted him. He did his little dance and the flutter, and I think he was waiting for Carlos's response. I don't know what Carlos's response was, but it was a magical moment. It was magical.
Carlos, do we have to question your orientation now?
Oh no. There was definitely no homo on Carlos's part. He was being very
on Carlos's part.
Nathan, I don't. It wasn't even a homo situation. I'm telling you, it was like there was none. It was a
Did he
bromance.
serenade
a
Carlos?
bromance in the making, is what it was.
What? So bromance means it's no homo.
Yeah, it's the same thing, but with no homo. Like they weren't trying to, go on a date, but they vibed.
They were having a date.
I was trying to bring the conversation down to earth, and I was like, "Come on, man, we have to meet some common ground somewhere."
Oh, you guys met a common ground. That is for damn sure. You guys
Carlos, were you the
that shit was
big spoon or the little spoon?
It was an hour and a half of talking, and here's the odd part: Nathan didn't know I was there, and he just humaned the fuck out. It was crazy. I put it this way: I had so many opportunities to say something or just be there, and I just I muted my fucking mic and just watch the courtship.
Just get up and share it, man. Just share the thing. It'll be a Christmas gift from me to you guys.
You want to share? Wait, you want me to share the song?
Was it recorded somewhere?
Oh, I recorded the fuck out of it.
Sean records everything for future.
If you talk to me, put this way: if you have a conversation with me, you're probably being recorded. The thing is that I don't use everything except for these wonderful, wonderful moments like Carlos had. And for the record, I think it was Carlos. What was it? Probably half hour, 45 minutes before that happened. You had asked me if I was recording, so it wasn't. See, that was the thing. It was like, okay, I'm not going to use any of it. I'm only going to use what you say I could use, but. If it's only the song, I'll play just.
Yeah, I was like, Sean, please tell me you're recording this, and like you can tell, like you can hear the microphone. He's like getting out of bed or something, and Carlos like, oh my god, I'm recording
But it was hilarious. I've heard Carlos talk like this in our groups. You know how you just there's no guard. I've heard Carlos do, but I'm telling you right now. And Carlos, you have to back me on it. Nathan talked like a rational adult with another adult about just their common interests.
Well, how the fuck did he manage that? Because he's not a rational adult. How would he know how to talk?
No shit.
Oh, I'm telling you right now. If I talked to that Nathan, anyone, you would have a rational conversation. That's how I know it's a different guy. That's how I know this is a gimmick.
Sean?
Yes?
I just have to interject. Do you realize that the same thing was said about Ted Bundy?
Yeah. What he does behind closed doors is not my business. But
he doesn't do it behind closed doors. He does it in hallways, bashing down women's freaking doors.
I know. Yeah. That's all weird, too. But I'm just saying, I'm telling you what a conversation was like, okay? I'm not giving you the man's my personal view on him, because if it was my view, I asked about his weight for a fight.
A narcissist.
You know what? I'm telling you right now, he was normal for an hour and 5 minutes. He was.
No.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
He just played normal.
No, yeah, I think this was. I
think
he didn't think he was on camera anymore.
He's in Facebook jail for approaching kids in a park.
Yes.
Well, guys, he wasn't being well. Nobody was disagreeing with him, violently or anything. And so he was kind of like just very chill, like we were having just a back and forward. And I hate to say that because he didn't have an audience. Because I'm not gonna say that he does it, it's a show what he puts on, but he's pretty passionate about what he believes, and because there wasn't anybody just going back and forward real hard, he was just kind of had his guard down and just conversing. Well, maybe there was some shrooms, I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's more plausible.
Yeah,
he had something that calmed him the fuck down.
True.
I'm telling you,
hey Sean,
weird. What?
If we arrange a boxing match with Nathan, are you going to be the referee?
No. No. There's
Hey,
no
yeah,
way.
Sean, you could.
I would make a campaign to be able to have a fight with him before you do. Matter of fact, so if I was a ref, I would let him win, just so he could think he got it, and then I could be able to go.
And then knock him out.
Yeah, see, it wouldn't be fair to you, Crash. I can't be ref.
Hey,
Well,
Sean,
we have to find somebody if I arrange this, and I don't know who to get because everybody I know would be partial.
Yeah,
George,
that's the
Blue.
aura he has given off. So that is going to be very hard to find. No, I don't think Blue would be a good idea. I can see Blue getting a good knee or a kick in.
I would say Sean Smith, but Sean Smith a few weeks ago said he would join Crash in hunting him down.
Yeah, I think Sean has a dark side when it comes to that.
Sean does have
there
a
is
dark
no
side.
possible. Listen, when he approached those kids at that school, if that was my kid's school, oh man,
Yep, see,
I would have creamed him. I would have creamed him.
Good luck finding a non-biased ref. Good luck. You might as well convince him of a bare knuckle, no rules fight.
Well, Crash suggested that. He knows a forest where he can do that.
Here's the thing. I doubt it's
just
going to
find
happen.
somebody who doesn't like both. Find somebody who doesn't like both of them, like Pastor. What's his name? Dean Odell.
Yeah, exactly. Have you got the money?
No, I was just going to do this to raise some money, but
I'm telling you right now, offer to buy his shirts. He'll do it.
Well, you know,
Buy his flyers.
It's still hard to find somebody that would actually do it, that would completely be biased. But you know, I mean,
he would do it for an Impossible Burger for Burger King.
I'm telling you right now, Sean's just
maybe.
Sean's just trying to get in the. Sean's just trying to get in the ring. That's what he's doing right now.
See, that's the other thing that bothers me. The other thing with it is, he's going to try and bring his entire entourage ringside.
Oh, it'd be like a WWF match then. We'd be like bringing out tables and everything. That'd be pretty funny.
In order to have somebody the same weight class as Nathan Thompson, you have to have him fight Chris Berry.
Oh, Chris. Me and Chris would probably be in the same weight class, but he would never. He knows our abilities. He gets that. When you train for a while and versus not, there's a disability. There's a what do you call it?
Speech impediment.
Said the foreign guy.
Said the foreign guy.
Yeah, you don't think I forgot about that, right, farmers?
No, I know you ain't forgotten about that, mate.
Said the foreign guy. Screw you! I can speak. I'm bilingual.
I don't think I could go on a Crash diet and get the same weight class as Nathan, but he says his diet makes him stronger and everything else. So
and grow taller.
Yeah, righto. Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, but it also increases his myelin sheath, which is actually impossible unless you had multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
I was just kind of thinking I'd walk into the ring smoking a cigarette because it ain't going to last more than 1 or 2 rounds.
Don't do that, Crash.
Look, Nathan can recite the whole table of elements, yet he thinks that moonlight is cold. I mean, that's all I'm going to say.
Come on, he can recite pi to umpteen decimal places, but he doesn't actually know what it is.
Sean, I don't think he has enough mass behind a punch or knows how to throw a punch hard enough to hurt.
Yeah, well, unless he can work out the Euclidean, non-Euclidean line of vectoring, he won't be able to throw.
Who needs mass when you have boys?
Yeah, he seems to remember things in a strange way. The alphabet from the other side or from inside out. So he seems to have some kind of selective recognition or something. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a perfect medical term for it. He's a dumbass.
I mean, I've been hit with beer bottles and had pool cues broke over my face, and it didn't faze me. So I'm not really sure what he could do to me in a ring.
Yeah.
Is the hangout still going? Is the hangout chat still going?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought it'd be a fun way to raise some money to donate to something good and get my frustrations out legally.
Legally.
Yeah, that means you'd have to like not kill him.
Dang it. What's the purpose then?
Well, exactly.
I do want to get rid of all flat earthers, you remember? According to Chirag or Shrek.
Oh, yeah.
Did anyone see the video where Nathan is, where he says he's in Arkansas with that guy with the beard and that the same similar hat as he had? He seems to be even as crazy as Nathan. I don't know. There's a video.
Trying to think who that could be.
What I do know is Nathan is only about 284 miles from my current location.
That's kind of weird.
Did you say that a guy was crazier than Nathan Thompson? I don't think that's scientifically possible.
He posted his location in that last Flat Earth meetup stream he did, Sean. Do you think I didn't Google it?
That's weird still.
Yeah, weird. There's certain things you just can't help yourself. Like I can tell you where Mr. Riley lives. Because he told everybody. Anthony, Sleeping Warrior. I know exactly where he lives because he told everyone.
That's so weird.
It's not stalking if they make the information public.
Yes, it is. It is so much. All right, guys. I think we're going to be done. I got things I got to do.
Yeah, right.
Damn, that hurts, Carlos.
Well, you need to upload that video on YouTube.
I will for the holidays. It's not even Christmas yet.
Look, just upload that segment on
I know what Davros
robot.
I know what Davros is getting for Christmas. It's 15 pounds of lead in a leather bag.
Huh? That's kind of weird too. What is wrong with you?
My robot is still.
All right, I'm getting out of here.
No, it's the fact that Sean, you have no idea.
It scares me.
15 pounds of lead. That's a lot of lead.
Okay,
in
guys.
a leather bag.
Okay. Merry Christmas to you guys. Thank you for being
Merry
on
Christmas
the
to
panel.
you.
Merry
Have a
Christmas.
wonderful one. Davros, you need to come back out of the future and enjoy Christmas like everyone else. Thank you.
Yeah, Sean, I posted a video for you. You need to watch it, and it'll explain everything.
I will.
Is Mel Gibson in it?
All right, guys. All right, so that was fun. So, like I said, I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. Soul Survivor. Again, I appreciate the shit out of that PayPal. That PayPal you sent. I appreciate the crap out of it. You have no idea. And other than that, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. It was a fun one. It was nice, short, and sweet. I'll probably be on a little, maybe later. Not sure. Doubt it, but we'll see. Let's see, got that one. I gotta turn all this stuff off. Hang on. There we go. I'll turn this slide off. Perfect. Okay, so like I said, we'll see you guys around, and peace.